Hi there, welcome to the Armourgeddon channel. My name is Alex Garner and today we're going to be talking about this vehicle. The absolute beast of a vehicle I have behind me right here is what they call the Russian T55. Now this was developed, or at least the prototype was developed near the end of World War II, and afterwards this kind of dominated the battlefields for a good few decades afterwards. Absolutely beautiful vehicle, which I'm going to show you a little bit more inside, and also at the very end I'm going to be showing you a bit of it actually driving over a car, which is going to be quite interesting and it's quite cool to watch. Now, as I said, this is one of the most produced vehicles in the entire kind of tank world, I guess you could say. There was between 86,000 and 100,000 of these made with all their different variants. The vehicle weighs roughly about 36 tonnes, and as you can tell, comparing it to more of the British vehicles or the American tanks, it's not actually that tall. Now, the reason they did this was, well, partly for saving a bit of materials, I guess, but it was mostly so actually out on the battlefield, there's not as much tank as visible, so again, hopefully making it less likely to be shot. Weighing only 36 tonnes, it's actually a relatively light tank when compared to, again, the other sort of vehicles at the time. Now, with its large tracks and, again, being a little bit lighter, it was actually quite a good vehicle for going along soft ground. Again, making it perfect for a lot of parts of Russia or where the USSR was really kind of fighting at the time. So being a smaller vehicle did have some drawbacks, as you can imagine. Now in a minute, when I show you actually inside of the vehicle, you'll see how cramped and how small it is. Now you may have heard the kind of, well, I guess the rumour or the fact of Russian tankers, especially during World War II, the average size of a Russian tanker was 5'7". They had to pick a lot of smaller guys to fill some of the positions inside of this vehicle. Now personally, I don't know how exactly true that is. I think it was more just for the driver they had to be a certain height. But once we get inside, I'll show you a little bit and you'll kind of see that you don't really want to be a very big bloke inside. As I've already mentioned with the tracks, you can get a bit of a better view here. As you can see, they're about 1.5 foot wide, which again is relatively wide, especially when compared to the earlier tanks during World War II. Obviously, technology's come on a little bit further since then, especially as when these were being used. Now, a bit of a cool fact about these, you've got here the pins that go along. Now, they're called dry pins. So what you'll notice is there isn't actually a cap or any kind of nut or bolt or anything like that holding them on this side. Now, the reason they did this was, again, firstly to make it a little bit cheaper, but also to make it a little bit easier to maintain. So what you actually have here is the track pin that comes through this side with obviously a bigger end that side to make sure it doesn't go all the way through. And as it's driving along, if the pin does start to come a little bit loose and does come out of there and slide that way a little bit, there is a little V-shaped bit of metal just up here. Now, as the track goes around, the V-shape pushes the pin back in, holding it in place. Now, it does have another benefit, like I say, about being easier to maintain. Because it's kind of a freestanding pin and not actually held in by any rubber, bushels or anything like that, it allows the pin to come out a lot easier than if it had rubber around it. Mainly because as it's coming in and out, it's unseizing itself. You know, it's being a little bit looser. So as and when you need to fix it, it should, emphasize on the should, slide out a little bit easier than more British vehicles or the American tanks that usually had nuts on the end and were quite often, as we found out with a lot of the vehicles we work on, they're usually always seized. Quite a distinctive feature on this vehicle is this space just here between the first and the second set of wheels. Now you'll notice along all the other wheels the gap is only about a couple inches or so, but this one is about a foot or so. Now the reason they did this was for landmines. Now if you're going along, you run over a landmine, usually it's going to be these first two bits of track that hit it. By leaving a bit of a gap, it hopefully allows these wheels to stay relatively level, meaning that the turret still has a level firing platform, meaning that you should be all right and hopefully you can fire back if there's something shooting at you. I'm not sure on how much use this actually was because I guess it depends on the size of the landmine. If it's a big enough landmine, I guess having this bit of a foot space isn't going to make too much difference. But it was one of the things that the Soviet engineers at the time did think was a realistic idea, so that's why they did it. An interesting feature of the T55 are these fuel tanks just here. Now, as you can see, they're on the outside. Not the greatest of places to be, especially when you're being shot at. Having just extremely highly flammable liquid on the outside of the tank isn't the best idea, but these weren't designed to actually stay on during battle. Now, the outside fuel tanks, I believe, hold about 400 litres of fuel, so they would use that for whenever they're going cross-country or driving along. When they actually got into a battle situation, or they're worried they're going to be in a battle soon, what they would do is actually disconnect these. From there, then they would just use the fuel tanks that are inside, which I believe are about 580 litres. As with most tanks, the engine is actually in the back of the vehicle, and it's actually a really good cold weather startup system. You can imagine being in Russia, it gets absolutely freezing, so again, being Russian engineers, they've designed something that should work up to God knows what kind of temperature. Now, the engine in the back is actually what we call a V12 38.88 litre diesel, and I think it's water cooled. Well, actually it is water cooled because that's something we've got to do on it. Now it's got an ever so slight leak at the minute, that's why it's open, but we haven't had the time yet to fix it. We're waiting to get the Stuart done. Once the Stuart light tank is done, then we'll spend half a day, get this all looking good and just get that water leak fixed. But other than that, it works an absolute treat, this vehicle does. And if you wait until the very end, we are going to show you a bit of footage of us actually driving around and also crushing a car, which is quite cool. It was fitted with the 100mm rifled gun, as you can see here. I believe it was the D10T, I believe. Now, you can see, this is what would have gone in. It is extremely heavy, and you can imagine that would pack a punch. So you can imagine the lads inside, you need to be quite strong to be able to load this up. Now, with this vehicle, there was a 4-man crew. So like I say, you'd have the driver, you'd have the commander up there, you'd have the gunner sat pretty much in between his legs, and then you would have the loader on this side just here. So we're now sat inside the driver's position, and as you can tell, there is no room whatsoever. As you can see as well, we have fitted, or wrote on the side of the wall, how to actually start the vehicle and get it running, because every other bit of information in here is actually wrote in Russian. And although we do know a lot about military vehicles, surprisingly, we're not fluent in Russian. But as you can see down here, if you can, you've got all the pedals, the gear selector, and then all the information that you would need. And back there is the rest of the crew compartment, which I'll be showing you in just a second. So coming in through the hatch here, you can just about make out where the aimer and then the commander would have sat. And I'll be getting in just a second to kind of show you a bit closer, but you can already tell there is hardly any room at all. So we're now inside. I'm currently sat in the commander's position. Kind of gives you guys a bit of a better view from what these guys really had to do. But as you can see from where my legs are, it's pretty much, if there was a bloke there, you'd be hitting him in the back with your legs. So I don't think I'm that big of a bloke, but I think I'm definitely too big for being in one of these. Now, if there was an emergency and you had to get out, you've got to wait for him to get out first before you then can get out. And you can imagine there was a lot of stuff to get caught on in this vehicle. It dread to think really what it was like. So a little bit of information about our T55 here. We actually bought it from the Czech Republic a number of years ago. There was a few to pick from, but this was the best really, so that's part of the reason that we picked it. Absolutely lovely vehicle. We didn't really have to do too much to it once we got it. I believe all we had to do was needle gun the outside and then respray it. And like I showed you on the inside was pretty much mint as it already was. Throughout the mid-20th century, these were used in so many different battles and by so many different militaries. They served in the Hungarian Revolution, the Yom Kippur War, and they're even still being used by countries like Sudan today. And the last known one of these to actually be destroyed in battle was in 2015, funny enough, by the Russian Air Force. Thanks very much for watching. Hope you guys have enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy the video, please do like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you.